In a world where adulting can often seem overwhelming, there's a secret key to unlocking true serenity: healing the inner child. Within the pages of the acclaimed book, Help Elevate and Learn, a guide to healing your inner child, discover a journey, a transformation, a rebirth. This isn't just about reading, it's about embarking on a path to self-discovery and inner peace. Simultaneously, tune into the soothing waves of the Help Elevate and Learn, a guide to healing your inner child podcast. A sanctuary where candid conversations blend with expert insights, creating a harmonious symphony of healing. Each episode is a step closer to unburdening that youthful spirit within. Remember, it's never too late to offer compassion to that child within you, to rewrite your story with a happier, healthier narrative. Healing the Inner Child, the book, the podcast, the journey. Step into the world of self-healing and witness the transformation unfold.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/SacconiPrinceHeal. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who's had years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. You can do it all from your phone or your computer, via a phone call, a video chat, or messaging. However you feel most comfortable, it is the easiest possible way to start talking to a therapist. You'll be matched to a therapist usually within 48 hours, so you can get started fast. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/SacconiPrinceHeal or choose SacconiPrinceHeal during your sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month.
Get ready for Unchained Minds, navigating mental health for Black men and men of color with power and purpose. Hosted by Dr. Charles Dent. This is more than a show. It's a call to action. If you face the chains of stigma, racism, and mental health struggles, we're here to help you break free. Tune in for real conversation, real healing, and real empowerment. This is your moment to rise. Don't miss.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hey, I'm Dr. Charles Dent, and thank you for tuning in to our Unchained Minds, navigating mental health for Black men and men of color with purpose and power. So we want to include you in this conversation today. We really appreciate everybody want to address these mental health challenges that we're having in our community. And sometimes be very difficult for us to have these conversations around the table to talk about our mental health challenges. So today I have a very special guest, very good friend of mine, Sacconi Prince, who will introduce himself, but we're going to be able to talk about his book, H.E.A.L, today. And we're going to talk about healing the inner child. We're going to discuss a lot surrounding this particular area. So welcome, Sacconi. Glad you're here today.
Dr. Dent, I am so excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Really appreciate all you have done and all that you continue to do. Won't you introduce yourself to some people who may never heard of Sacconi Prince?
Well, I normally tell people my name is Sacconi Prince of SacconiPrince.com, where we make motivation personal by introducing you to yourself. I'm a motivational speaker, author, coach, and trainer.
Awesome. I really appreciate you being here today. You just want to dive into this book right away, or you want to talk a little bit more about let's get into your book, because I think you know how I feel about the book H.E.A.L. You just really do. You know how much I have dove into it and really got some nuggets in it and talk about how we heal this inner child. Well, so what inspired you to write this book?
Well, the book H.E.A.L is an acronym for Help, Elevate, and Learn. And the subtitle is It's a Guide to Healing Your Inner Child. And what inspired me to write this book was I started to notice a pattern. Because like I said, I do motivational speaking. I've done personal development and leadership development. But I started to understand that there was something that was missing. Mm-hmm. There was an aspect of our personality that had yet to be really addressed, and that was the inner child. And the way I came to that conclusion was because I started seeing a lot of people that were they were acting out of their trauma and of their wounds. And a lot of that stuff happened when they were children. And oftentimes people don't realize and they don't understand what it is. And they'll just say, well, that's just where I am. But I tell people all the time, it's not what you do, but why you do it.
Mhm.
And so I started to actually dive into this arena, this aspect of mental health. And to me, it is the bedrock of everything else, because our childhood impacts our life throughout.
Yes. And that makes a whole lot of sense, because you know how I feel about how we don't address childhood traumas and
Right.
things of this nature that show up in our adulthood, because as children, we do the best we can with the information that's given to us.
Correct.
And so we don't know how to articulate psychological abuse, psychological hurts, wounds.
Right.
We don't know how to say, hey, mom, you know what this is going to do to me later on.
Right.
Or
Right.
we don't know how to say, hey, dad, you leaving my life is not a good sign that it's going to do something to me. So
Correct.
all those issues start to pile up as children, then they start showing up in adulthood. That's a real good point. So how does Heal different from any self-help or motivational books?
Well, it differs because it really focuses on you.
Mm.
I start the book off talking and introducing you to my inner child.
Mm.
My name is Sakoni, but my mother would call me Coney, Evangeline Prince, God rest her soul. She would call me Coney when she didn't want to say my full name. So that was the name I gave to my inner child. And I realized that a lot of people, they have nicknames growing up.
Mm.
And if we give a name and a face and actually give a voice to that part of ourselves that we may have tucked away or locked away or pacified or put in a corner somewhere, if we don't go and check on it, and that's what chapter 2 in the book talks about, inner child checkup,
Right.
checking on the inner child that's within us. Because again, a lot of us say, well, I'm an adult anymore. I'm not a child. I don't have to deal with that. But they keep showing up. They keep
Right.
showing up and showing out.
And the thing that I like about the checkup piece, when you talk about checking in with your inner child,
Right.
and sometimes I think we fail to check in with the inner child, but that inner child now is still having temper tantrums, still angry about circumstances, situation, because they're not addressing these issues, as you said in the book. And I think it's really, really good book to talk about this. And so how do you give yourself permission to address the inner child?
You give yourself permission when you start identifying issues that won't go away, that keep coming up, they keep showing up, and they start to show up in your relationships, in your careers, in your goals, the things that you're trying to do and accomplish. You have to step back and take a look at yourself from an objective standpoint and start questioning yourself. And I tell people all the time, we'll question everybody else, but rarely do we question ourselves. Why do I do what I do? Why am I this way? Why do I act or respond or react in a certain way? And so that, to me, is the first thing. When you start to see behavior that's a pattern, that somebody once said that if it's hysterical, it's historical. That was one of the ladies that was on my podcast, because sometimes things are just triggers.
Right.
People overreact, they go overboard, and you wonder why, because they've been triggered because of some trauma or some wound from their past.
Yeah, and so you talk a lot in the book about the triggers, and I think the triggers part is very, very important, that we start paying attention to what triggers us to react a certain way and have this certain pattern of behavior. And then sometimes we don't want to uncover it, because one of the things I got from reading your book is how sometimes we try to protect the inner child and we don't see that inner child. It's not an enemy to us, because you talk about reparenting. The inner child is not our enemy, but we have the tendency to act adulting by protecting that inner child, so we don't address these issues. So what do you think about that? How do we continue to just say, hey, this inner child really needs to be addressed?
Well, I think we need to spend some time literally revisiting our childhood, because again, a lot of us, we've locked so much away, we've bottled so much up, we bury so much, but not realizing that we didn't bury it, we planted it. We didn't pull it down far enough, and it's planted, so it keeps coming up. So we owe it to ourselves to be the best version of ourselves. And I believe that God wants us to be better than we were yesterday. And because of that, we have to put in the work for us to get to that place that we can actually be honest about who we are and what we have and what we didn't get. And then start addressing those needs, because oftentimes we will look to other people to fulfill those needs, and we haven't addressed them ourselves.
Yeah, and that's very, very important, that when they get into psychotherapy and get into these therapeutic moments, that these unaddressed needs that
Right.
we, in a sense, I'm into Glasser world, about inviting certain people in our quality world to meet these particular needs. And when those
Right.
needs are not being met,
Right.
it leads to frustration and all these other anguish that happen because of childhood need. So let me ask you a question. This one piece that you got in about asking for help.
Okay. Asking for help?
Yeah, I mean, why it's so difficult, especially as Black men, you know, because we have to build this wall, or we protect the inner child.
Right.
And because we supposed to be in this macho, egotistic, driven male, macho men,
Right.
and we don't ask for help.
Well, what I've seen is that a lot of individuals are living out of their fear. And what I mean by that is fear of what other people would think, of what other people say, how other people will perceive them. And if you're not happy with yourself, no one else or nothing else is going to actually help you get to that place. So understanding that we have a job to do in healing ourselves and actually coming to a place that we can actually ask for help. Someone else told me that true strength lies in asking for the help that you need. And I tell my kids all the time, there's nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong with needing help. There's everything wrong with needing it and not being willing to ask for it.
Yeah, and I like at the very end of the book, you say healing from hurt is up to you. It wasn't your fault, but it's your responsibility.
Yes.
So if you ask the person the question, how do I take responsibility for my childhood trauma? Let's say deals with abandonment issues, neglect issues, or even being betrayal. The betrayal issue as a child, that parents promised you something like giving you a car, the car you talked about again, and the guy didn't get the car, but his behavior became, I'm going to always give my children what was lacking in my life.
Correct.
Because now he's looking at what was missing in his life and thinking he can substitute it by doing it for his children. So I wanted to ask that question around that particular subject about when you're asking for help and when you're coming back to this whole piece, how do you get away from trying to protect the childhood trauma or anything by trying to feed it with your children, like giving them gifts and stuff of that nature?
Well, you really have to see the type of person that you want to be on the other side of your breakthrough. I posted just last week, like the difference between a breakdown and a breakthrough is where you apply pressure. A lot of people, they apply pressure to themselves and they break down instead of applying pressure to the situation to get the breakthrough. So in order for us to get to that place that we can actually get the help and ask for the help, we need to see the end results. And, you know, I think about how the Bible tells us for the glory that was set before him, Christ, he endured the cross. He didn't look at the cross. He looked at the glory that was on the other side. And oftentimes we don't realize that what we need and what we're looking for is on the other side of our pain, of our frustration, of our work. We have to look beyond our current situation and see where it is we want to be. And that, to me, is the catalyst for us putting in the work to get there. Because I'm not just stuck in this place that I don't like. I see where I can be. And because I see it, I can go to it.
Well, so think about when this one chapter you've driven so much about emotions, and you talked a lot about these pieces dealing with emotions, even crying. You know, you talked about how you sometimes we need a good cry.
Exactly.
I mean, think about it. For example, watching men lose their mothers and they don't cry at a funeral. Like, I got to be this macho, got to hold it together. Or you have people like, I got to be strong for everybody else. And then you don't realize you're breaking down within yourself because you've been told as a child that you have to be strong for everybody else. And you don't realize that you're really destroying yourself within you because you're not crying. So tell us about that chapter that you talked about, the emotions and the crying and why it's necessary for us to cry.
I think it's important for us to process our emotions, not ignore them, not suppress them, not bury them, not push them away, but to process them. Basically, feel what you feel and allow it to run its full course. Because I tell people all the time that we all need somebody to throw up on, because our body, even when we get physically sick, whether it's been some food poisoning, ate some bad potato salad, or whatever it is, our body wants to get that out, in fact, before the healing can start. And the same way emotionally, if we don't process our emotions, the hurt, the pain, the disappointment, the actual loss, if we don't go through that process, then we are holding in that sickness. Right. And it's becoming worse and worse. And the sad part about it is we've done it for so long where we've gotten used to it. And a lot of people are afraid of letting it go, because it's like, if I let this pain go, what am I going to have?
Yeah, and so it's interesting you talked about pain, and your book talks about this as well. It's because my definition of this is when the suffering comes. Suffering comes because you've been sitting in your pain too long. And this is me. This is Dr. Dent. So the key thing is, I believe this: when you stay in your pain too long and you start ignoring it, you start suffering. Because if you address the pain immediately, like you got a bad finger, but you kept ignoring it, and you just like, well, I'm gonna adjust and I'll make it through it. Right. But not knowing, you lead into a pathway of suffering. And so addressing the pain, when it's first showing up, then I say, well, I'll go to the doctor 2 years from now. Well, the pain has been there 2 years, and now you're starting to address it. So dealing with this inner child, what I'm seeing there, Sakoni, is that there are too many of us got this inner child feeling the pain of neglect, abuse, abandonment, detachment. All these disorders function in our lives have created pain in us. Right. Now we're suffering. Now, how's it that a person can be like 45 years of age, left home at 16 years of age, and still suffering from some things that happened when they were a child?
Well, they carry that pain with them. And I forgot who it was, but I remember one of the ladies on my podcast, she actually mentioned that whatever age you were when the pain hit, when the trauma hit, when the wound occurred, you stop maturing in that area at that age.
Yeah, and you think about the brain development, and I think our kids don't, and we don't see this, and we try to address these gun violence and everything going on in our community, and that's not the issue. That's not the root issue. But I go back to one of the things you said about that seed that's been planted, and now it's not like, it's the seed been planted. And I wrote in my book, part of mine, how did I water it, cultivate it, nurture it, not even recognizing I'm doing that to myself. Right. Because I didn't know any other tools, didn't have any tools, didn't have any structures, didn't have any coping mechanisms. Right. But I kept watering the seed of trauma, of neglect, because my conversations has been like, my parents did this to me, or you hear people say, especially like in the church setting, well, this church hurt me, we got church hurts and all this other stuff. But how long do people live like that?
Well, they live like that until they get tired. And I know we've all heard it, got tired of being tired and sick of being sick. They live like that to where they realize there is more, again, beyond where I am. There's a life that I don't want to carry this anymore. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I don't want to pass this on to my children. I don't want to operate out of my pain. I want to operate out of the place that God has called me to. Because what we also fail to realize is that we are setting a precedence for those that are watching us. And there are people watching us. I don't care if we have children or not. There's somebody looking up to us. And if we realize that we have become the catalyst, by which they will kind of gauge their life, then we will realize I need to make some adjustments, because if I don't, I'm setting the wrong example for them.
Well, and you talked about looking back in the past and present future in your book. And I think that's very important that we sometimes don't want to do that. Right. Because I remember Bishop Hawking talking about you got to face it, trace it, erase it, replace it. And you talked about that. And sometimes I don't think we're willing to pull back the layers and saying, I don't want to, this onion will make me cry, like, because it is painful. And like some people go like, well, I don't want to continue to deal with that. I'm living now, I'm moving forward, I'm future. But the reality you just said, the impact it has on the children's children. And today science is showing us that things has impacted our children up to 14 generations. So, wow. So it's more than just like, we take it out of context of the Bible, the second and third generation. But the key thing is, how much is it impacting our children? Because you said in the book, real good book. And listen, I know we only have so much time left, but we're going to talk about, but the book is so available to people to read it and get it and to say, hey, I want to work on me. I mean, I think you should read it more than one time. I think you should read it this, how many times? Okay. But I think you need to read it more than one time, because there's so much in there. There's so many nuggets in there that can help people deal with the inner child. But here's the thing that you have really sparked with me. the inner child becomes the inner critic.
That part
Go
right
ahead.
there. That
Yeah.
part right there. Because if we don't give vent and give voice to that part of ourselves that was neglected, abused, abandoned, detached, it will become that voice that's always pulling us back and holding us back. But see, we think that, okay, well, that is the enemy. If we worked on healing that part of ourselves, that same part of ourselves, that same part could be the one that actually leads us and helps us to get to where it is I honestly believe God would have us to be, because he talks about the faith, having the faith of a little child. And there's a difference between being childish and childlike.
Right.
And I believe that once we're healed, in fact, once we've healed that part of ourselves, what happens is we open up a doorway, a vast doorway for us to be able to be the people that God intended for us to be.
Well, and that is so good, because remember, even when Jesus said, "Physician, healed thyself," it's a lot of times I think we take people off the pathway of healing, and we think we just preach to them and we say a few prayers and send them on their way. They're good to go.
Right.
And it's much more. It's much deeper than just a casual Sunday morning conversation with the pulpit. You know, it's like, and it has to be deeper, because I could tell you from my experience in being a pastor and being in those positions, it's much more deeper. And especially if the pastor himself and pastor family dealing with some childhood issues that's now showing up in the pulpit. Right. And I think it's so needed in our communities to open up and say, let's have the conversation around the table to deal with mental health challenges, mental health issues. Right. Let's start unchaining, take these chains off of us. Right. As children, we don't have to protect the inner child as an adult. We can talk to the inner child. We can repair it, like you said in the book. And I think it's very, very good if one person hearing this today on this broadcast and say, because, you know, Sakoni, it's like, you know, we need to heal. We need to break these chains. We need to have this breakthrough, as you say. Right. We need to have this in our community so our community can heal. Right.
Well, if you want to get the book, you can go to my website, saconiprince.com/heal. That's CICONEPRINCE.com/heal. Then I think there's a / after that. But there, in fact, not only can you find a link, where you can purchase the book, but you can also listen to a podcast, which I've created because I want to have people like yourself, Dr. Dent, on the podcast, because I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a therapist, but I was qualified enough to write the book. But I wanted to get people like you in there to help make sure and frame up a lot of stuff I put in the book. And it's been so refreshing to have a lot of people who have the discipline in this area of mental health. They come on the podcast, they're like, yes, that's exactly what I've been trying to tell people. Right. And so me being a lay person, I'm not using a lot of technical terms, but I'm trying to make sure, again, my goal is to start the conversation. I don't want to end it. I want to start the conversation because I want people to take the time to actually look and see, is there a part of me that is still hurting from my past?
Yeah, and that's very, very important that we start doing that. And because here's one thing I put on the paper: how do we avoid this fast food healing?
Wow, how do we avoid? We avoid fast food healing by pulling out the crock pot.
and I think that's the thing we need to recognize. For people, get away from the fast food healing. Get away from, I go to church one Sunday, I got it and I'm good. Not realizing it's not the fast food healing that we need the crock pot. And I think sometimes we try to do everything in a quick fix. Let's get it done. And not even, because I watch people in sessions like, just show me how. I said, so you want the method of what it's going to take to fix it, not being able to address what the root cause of it is. And so I'm in a hurry because we, just like I was saying about Black men, that, you know, my dad grew up, you got to learn to fix everything. You got to fix the car, you got to fix the refrigerator, you got to fix what's going on, you got to fix the plumbing, because you can't afford to invite somebody in.
Exactly.
And so we have this, I got to fix it mindset, not knowing that is the fast food healing, not realizing you might need some help. As you said, disclaimer in the book, often enough, If you need to get some professional help, do so.
Yes.
Because it's nothing wrong with going to sit down with someone and say, I do have these mental health challenges that's going on in my life. I have poor relationships.
Right.
I'm sexual active, hyper vigilant in sex, because not seeing that these sexual addictions and behaviors are linked to these childhood things that may have been missing. We don't see that spending and like how people feel about themselves, because they're these childhood things. You fat, you're not going to be any good. You're just like your dad and everything of this nature. That stuff didn't leave you. It was planted in you. That seed was there. And somehow your behavior is playing it out. And I think it's so important, Sakoni, for people, especially when we want to have this unchained minds. We want to unchain, navigating mental health, and being able to say these things to people, get help. You know, if you see it's just you lashing out your children, you can't keep a job and all, get help. I mean, it's important that we help people get the help they need.
We have to be able to look at ourselves objectively, and I mean honestly and openly, and just be real with who we are. And I love what you said, because we had lunch one time, and I asked you how you were doing, and your question was, what are you feeling?
And you did put that in the book. I saw that.
And because of that, I mean, because it made an actual impact, because a lot of people say, okay, if you say, how you doing? I'm fine. But if you ask them, what are they feeling? And that's that's a whole nother gear.
I mean, and I think the key thing is, Connie, you're welcome to come back in December if you want to do the second part of this. And we can do it in December. But we want to encourage people, because starting in January, it's going to be twice a month. I'm going to come on. But my wife encouraged me to do it every Saturday, because we need to be able to address these mental health issues and challenges that we have among our Black men and men of color. So we're not being apologetic. We're not apologizing to Target, because it's my experience and your experience that a lot of times Black men just don't know where to turn to get the help they need, and feeling safe that nobody in the neighborhood going to hear about it later on. You know, like, I mean, I am in a safe place, because you deal with these issues of childhood trauma and issues that sometimes people just don't trust nobody anymore. They have a distrust with that. And so we have to help people heal. All right. Any closing thing you want to say before we wrap this up?
Well, I know you wanted to mention about the event coming up.
Go ahead and mention about the upcoming.
Well, in March of next year, March 14th to 15th, we're going to be having, and we are part of the National Men's Prayer Call. We are actually on every Tuesday and Thursday on Facebook and on Zoom. But our, in fact, Mobile chapter, because the headquarters is really out of Dallas, but the Mobile chapter, we're having not a leadership conference, but a fellowship conference. March 14th and 15th is going to be here in Mobile, and we're going to have more information available on that. And I'm super excited, because the guys from Dallas are going to come down and actually be a part of it. And it's going to be an amazing opportunity for Black men and men of color to get together and to understand the importance of not just leadership, but fellowship, because who you're following dictates how you lead.
All right. Thank you for being with me, Sakoni. Hey, we're wrapping up. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in today, and look forward to this next month. God bless.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/SakoniPrinceHeal. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who's had years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. You can do it all from your phone or your computer, via a phone call, a video chat, or messaging. However you feel most comfortable. It is the easiest possible way to start talking to a therapist. You'll be matched to a therapist usually within 48 hours, so you can get started fast. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/SakoniPrinceHeal or choose Sakoni Prince Heal during your sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month.
In a world where adulting can often seem overwhelming, there's a secret key to unlocking true serenity, healing the inner child. Within the pages of the acclaimed book, Help Elevate and Learn, a guide to healing your inner child, discover a journey, a transformation, or rebirth. This isn't just about reading, it's about embarking on a path to self-discovery and inner peace. Simultaneously, tune into the soothing waves of the Help Elevate and Learn, A Guide to Healing Your Inner Child podcast. A sanctuary where candid conversations blend with expert insights, creating a harmonious symphony of healing. Each episode is a step closer to unburdening that youthful spirit within. Remember, it's never too late to offer compassion to that child within you, to rewrite your story with a happier, healthier narrative. Healing the Inner Child, the book, the podcast, the journey. Step into the world of self-healing and witness the transformation unfold.